All right, guys, so here we got active recovery day and active mobility. So this first one here is something new that I've been playing around with, and we're going to call this the world's best hip flexor stretch. Now, you're going to set your heel up just slightly a bit in front of 90 degrees, so maybe 6 inches in front of 90 degrees here. Now, before I start moving, I'm going to lock the back hip in place. I'm going to lock my torso in place, pull my shoulders down, lock my lats in place, stabilize my entire torso. And I'm keeping this pretty narrow here. I want to keep the internal rotation at the knee here on both sides. So I'm technically trying to still turn my hips forward. Now, what you're going to do here is keep that knee nice and lined up with the front of the hip. You're going to dig the heel in, dig the toe in on the backside, dig the knee on the backside. Think of that as your tripod. You're flexing the back glute. And I want you to try to drag the ground towards you with this front leg, prying through that heel, pulling your toes up, maintaining your internal rotation. And you're going to keep on prying that heel until the foot comes flat onto the ground. Now, I don't want you pushing forward into the front of the thigh here because that's going to get us the tip that we don't want. We want to make sure we're positioning ourselves with the hamstrings and the adductors, and we're dragging forward. And each time I switch my legs, I'm moving my foot maybe another inch forward here. So I'm just trying to slowly increase my range and get myself a little bit better active mobility here. My adductors are a very nasty spot. It's something I've always struggled with. So a lot of this adductor priming and a lot of this active adductor mobility, it's going to affect your pelvis posture. It's going to affect your bracing capabilities. It's going to affect your ability to get into position on most of your lifts. Now, one thing that we see here is, one, we can't be strong if we can't get into a position with weight on ourselves. If you can't get into the position without weight, you're probably not going to do very well once it gets loaded. It's just science. You're not going to break it. You're not going to be better in a loaded motor pattern than you are in a body weight one, just because of the fact that if you can't do it under no load, what makes you think you're going to be exert force under load? So we need to make sure that we're locking everything in here. And you're seeing, if you have an issue with being stuck in your hip crease, this is going to peel open the front of this hip crease here and get you unstuck from being in the front side of your hip and the front side of your quad. You're going to just yank all that open. And what we're doing, that's why it's so important to lock this hip into place. You see, my hip angle is not changing whatsoever. I'm just working through the front side of the hip here. Now, the next one we're going to come into, you've seen this one a dozen times, our standard back march. Now, this is a staple that I do almost every other day right now, and I can't physically get down to the deadlift bar without doing these. This is just something that's become a staple in my day-to-day life. If your back is giving you issues, if your hips are giving you issues, these are something you probably want to play around with. They keep you very honest. If you move slowly and try to move through the ranges of motion, they're going to treat you really well. This is another movement that's going to help peel open the front side of the hip and get you out of your hip crease and into your abdominals properly. And it's going to give you access to the adductors and the hamstrings, and it's going to elongate the calf, because what I'm doing here is I'm pulling that toe up as well as I put my heel on the ceiling. I'm elongating the back of the calf too. If you're used to having nasty spots on the back of your calf and the back of your knee, right in that crease there, this is for you. I haven't found anyone that's just naturally pristinely good at this pattern here. Most people can probably get some hamstring mobility and some internal rotation. This next one here, we're going to be trying to open up the teres, keep the lats engaged, fixed through a couple different shoulder mobility patterns that I've been working through here. So we're going to do our backhand plank to pike protraction. So we're going to be protracting and reaching down and forward and trying to maintain the internal rotation at the elbows, trying to keep the ribs nice and tight. You're not going to feel an insane pull on the backside of the hamstrings unless you're super, super tight in this position here. But you notice as I start getting a little more mobile here, I can actually move forward a little bit and protract myself into this plane change a little better. Now, this is going to tie into our next thing here. Now that we've addressed the teres and a little bit of protraction and serratus, we're going to actually learn to link up this entire lat insertion here. So I have dubbed these lat wipers. Now, what I'm trying to do here is maintain my internal rotation at the elbow as I'm holding on, as if you were doing a neutral grip lat pull down. You're about 3/4 of the way through. And what you want to do here is tie that line from the underside of the armpit down to the hip. And you want to make sure you don't lose this line at any point. You don't want to go any further than you can maintain this line here. If you lose the line, you suck. No, I'm kidding. You don't suck. It's a very challenging thing for some people, but you do need to try again if you lose it. Reset up, relock that string in down all the way to the hip into the oblique, and get used to tying this in. This is going to change how your back patterns, and it's also going to change how you stabilize in your big pattern lifts. Our last two things we're going to be coming into here is going to be a little bit of neck extension and also a little bit of thoracic bridging. So I've always had an issue. Most people are slightly cocked forward with their neck, where they're a little chin forward, they're a little leaned forward, they're just slightly a little rib cage up. Now what I'm doing here is, as I'm extending my head back into the roller, I'm yanking and pulling my ribs down the opposite way. Everything that we do in our days is tightening up these neck muscles. Tighten, tighten, tighten. You look at a screen, you move forward, you're always hovering forward in this chin down position here. We need to add some type of compensation in the opposite direction to get a little bit used to pulling our head back over top of the